Hello guys, today we're making apple pecan pie with salted pumpkin caramel. So it's kind of like 3 pies in one: apple pie, pecan pie, and pumpkin pie. And it's also fully vegan and plant-based. This is my mom's recipe and we first posted it on our blog back in 2016, which is crazy to think about. And since then a ton of people have tried it and loved it and made it part of their holiday traditions, which is really cool. So first we're gonna make the crust because it needs to be chilled in the fridge and it needs to be pre-baked before we assemble the whole pie. And we're gonna start with 1.5 cups of whole wheat flour, and you can also use spelt flour. And I'm gonna add it to my food processor along with a pinch of salt. And I'm gonna pulse it for just a second to mix. Next, I'm gonna add 1/2 cup of refined coconut oil. We're using refined because refined coconut oil doesn't have a flavor. It's very neutral, which is preferable for this recipe. This oil has been chilling in the fridge, which you wanna do. And when coconut oil is chilled, it becomes solid. This is kind of a very similar process to when you add cold butter to flour to make a crust, a pie crust or a tart crust. So what we're gonna do is just scoop little pieces of it into the food processor. So this is kind of imitating us cutting the butter. Just keep doing that. The oil is in and I'm gonna pulse the mixture until it resembles sand. And we're pulsing it because we don't want to heat up the coconut oil too much. Okay, that looks good to me. Next we're gonna add 4 tablespoons of ice cold water. So I have some water here that I just put ice in to ensure that it's really cold. And I'm gonna add that in. And we're gonna pulse to combine again. Now we're gonna check the mixture. So what we're gonna do is take it between 2 fingers and press it together, and it should come together into a dough. So this is looking pretty good actually. If it's not coming together for you, just keep adding the ice cold water 1 tablespoon at a time until you achieve this kind of dough that comes together. Next I have this 9 or 10-inch pie dish. I don't exactly remember, but either one will work. And we're gonna transfer the dough to the pie dish. And I also oiled this pie dish with more of the refined coconut oil. So we're gonna take this and transfer it to in here. So the cool trick that I recently learned, you know when you're tilting it to get stuff out of it, it's really annoying when the blade falls out. So I learned this trick where you put your finger in here and hold the blade down, and that way it doesn't fall out. Isn't that so cool? It's kind of been like totally life-changing for me, to be honest, because I use the food processor so much. And it looks really crumbly, and that's a good thing because it's gonna give us that kind of shortbread kind of texture to the crust. And next we're gonna shape our crust. So I'm gonna first start working with my hands, kind of distribute it across the pie dish, and start in the middle and just start pressing it in and just kind of flattening it over the middle and then up the sides. And once you've initially kind of distributed the dough everywhere, it helps to use something with a flat bottom, like I use a little measuring cup, to really get in there and shape it nicely. Kind of making sure that everything is as even as you can make it. Okay, I'm happy with how my crust is looking, and now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take a fork and prick it several times. And now I'm gonna put it in the fridge to chill for 1 hour while we do other stuff. So next we're gonna make the salted pumpkin caramel. And caramel is essentially heated up sugar, and caramel sauce, which is what we're making today, is a combination of heated up sugar and some sort of fat. Usually people use cream or butter, but today we're gonna use coconut milk as our fat and coconut sugar as our sugar. So I had a little bit of a problem when shopping for the coconut milk because the recipe calls for full fat coconut milk and the store was completely out of it. So I got the light, which I'm assuming will not work very well to make caramel because light coconut milk has a bunch of the fat taken out. So my thought was to also get some coconut cream, which is basically the stuff that you find at the top of a can of full fat coconut milk, and mix them together, and hopefully they'll combine to make kind of like a full fat coconut milk. So let's see what happens. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add my coconut milk and the coconut cream to a small saucepan. And I'm gonna add 3/4 cup of coconut sugar. And you could use other sugar here, but coconut sugar has this beautiful malty flavor that works super well when making caramel. So that's why we use it in this recipe. So mix that together. And now we're gonna heat this up. Okay, so I'm gonna turn this on to medium-high heat, transfer my saucepan over here, and we're gonna heat this up. And what we wanna do is establish a strong simmer and let the mixture simmer and reduce for about 15 minutes. And we're gonna see it thicken and reduce and turn into this beautiful caramel. This is like the easiest way to make a really, really good vegan caramel. And then later we'll add the pumpkin to make it a pumpkin caramel. And when you're bringing up your caramel to a boil, make sure to watch it really closely because it does tend to boil over, which is what happened to me just now. I was on my phone, not paying attention. The whole thing boiled over. I'm pretty sure I ruined my hot plate because it all got inside the heating element. Good thing that thing was only like $30, so I'm gonna replace it. But anyway, I had to move my caramel to the stovetop, so don't be like me. I think there's still some caramel on the floor actually. All right, so the caramel has come up to a nice steady simmer, and you don't really want this to be a very gentle simmer. It should be like a pretty rigorous simmer. So we're gonna let this go for about 15 minutes and you'll see that it'll thicken and become this lush, delicious thing. And make sure to stir it once in a while just so it's not sticking to the bottom or burning. So the crust is done chilling, and now we have to pre-bake it before putting the apples in and baking the whole thing together. So we're gonna blind bake it, which just means that the crust is gonna be covered so that it doesn't take on any color. We take a piece of parchment paper, put it on like this, and then we have to weigh it down with something so that it's covering the crust like this. So sometimes people use coins or special baking weights. I use baking beans, which are literally beans. They're literally old beans that I've labeled baking beans so I don't accidentally cook them. And just put them in and weigh it down. And we're gonna blind bake the crust for 20 minutes at 350 degrees Fahrenheit. Alright, so the caramel has been simmering for about 20 minutes. It's reduced quite a bit. And now I have 1/3 cup of pumpkin puree just out of a can, or you can make your own if you want. And I'm gonna add this to the caramel. Mix it in, and then I'm gonna let it cook for another 5 to 7 minutes until everything is nice and incorporated. Oh, and salt. It's a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Now I'm just gonna assemble all of the crumble ingredients together. So the crumble is going on top of the apple layer under the caramel layer. I have a 1/2 cup chopped pecans. Then we need a 1/2 cup of rolled oats. Then 1 tablespoon of coconut sugar. Pinch of salt, 1 teaspoon cinnamon. I have a little less. And then 3 to 5 cardamom pods, crushed and freshly ground. So the kind of cardamom I have is actually whole, but it's not in its pods. Here, I'll show you. So this is what's inside the green cardamom pods. So I'm gonna kind of eyeball that amount and grind it in my mortar and pestle. and add that into the bowl with the crumble. It smells so good. If you can get your hands on whole cardamom and freshly grinded, definitely do it, because it's like worlds away from the pre-bought, store-bought ground cardamom. It just smells amazing. Okay, I'm gonna give all of this a mix. And our caramel is done. So I'm gonna take it off the heat. It's beautiful and thickened, and it has this beautiful golden kind of orangey tone from the pumpkin and the coconut sugar. And we're gonna let this cool at room temperature for a few minutes and transfer it to the fridge, where it's really gonna thicken up and become super caramelly as it cools down completely. And then to finish up the crumble, we're gonna add 3 tablespoons of the refined coconut oil. It should be solidified. It's kind of cold in here, so mine is hard. If it's not, put it in the fridge so that it's nice and solidified. So we're gonna add those in and then use our hands to work it in. So the crumble is done and the crust is done pre-baking, so I'm gonna remove it from the oven. I'm gonna remove the baking beans. And I'm gonna let the crust cool while we prepare the apple filling. Okay, so for the apples, I have 5 apples here. This is a combination of Pink Lady and Gala. You can pretty much use any apples for this. So we're gonna peel, core, and slice these guys. So to peel, I just use a vegetable peeler. This is a little bit of a tedious process, so put on a podcast or put on a really good playlist or a show on your laptop or something like that. And I always have a bowl by my side when I'm cooking, to which I add only my vegetable scraps for composting. It's super convenient to just be able to put the scraps aside in a dedicated place and have them all together. Okay, so the apples are peeled and now we're gonna core them. So to core, cut it in half, and then I usually cut it into quarters. Then I take my small paring knife and just take out the core and any extra skin, and just keep going like that. Okay, so the apples are cored and now I'm gonna slice them. Slice, I usually lay a piece on its side and slice it like this. And slice pretty thinly, as thinly as you can. And then transfer the sliced apples to a bowl and keep going. Okay, now to the apples, we're gonna add 2 tablespoons of freshly squeezed lemon juice. And this is for tartness and to keep the apples from discoloring. Gonna mix that in. Half a cup of coconut sugar. 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. And then more cinnamon, cardamom, and nutmeg. For the nutmeg, I have whole pods, which is pretty cool. So I'm gonna grind some using a microplane grater, which is like a fine grater, and grinding the pod. Gonna grind up more cardamom. Add that in. And I'm out of cinnamon, unfortunately, but the recipe has you add 2 more teaspoons of cinnamon. And then lastly, 2 tablespoons of arrowroot powder. And arrowroot acts similarly to cornstarch. It helps kind of thicken everything. And mix it all together. It smells amazing. Okay, so now we're gonna add the apples to our crust, which has cooled down quite a bit. Flatten them out a little bit. And they're gonna decrease in volume quite a bit once they cook. And that is the oven, so I increased the oven temperature to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. Make sure to get all those nice juices. Now we're gonna sprinkle the crumble over top. And this guy is going into the 400-degree oven for 20 minutes. So it's been 20 minutes since the pie went in the oven, and now I'm going to reduce the temperature to 375. I'm going to cover the pie with a piece of parchment paper, and if you have like a special pie cover, definitely use that. And that's gonna bake for another 35 to 40 minutes until the apples are fully cooked. And the pie is done. It made the house smell absolutely amazing. Now comes the worst part, which is where we have to wait for the pie to cool before cutting into it or putting the caramel on top or eating it. So I'm gonna let this cool for another hour, maybe an hour and a half. Meanwhile, let's check on the pumpkin caramel because it's been in the fridge this whole time. So let's see if it thickened up. I think it did. Yep, it definitely did. Check this out. So if you're ever in a weird position of not being able to find full-fat coconut milk, but being able to find light coconut milk and coconut cream, you can definitely make caramel out of those two. It's getting kind of dark, so I just gotta finish this. So I've got my pumpkin caramel, and I'm just gonna generously drizzle it over top. Yum. And you're probably gonna have some caramel left over, which is a good thing because it's delicious on so many things. Try it on yogurt, try it on your oatmeal in the morning, spread it on toast, drizzle it on other desserts. And this is totally extra and optional, but you can also top it with more toasted pecans. And we're finally done. This is definitely a labor of love, but so perfect for a special occasion, like a holiday or any other celebration, and especially amazing in the fall. And let's cut into it. It's definitely not ready, it needs a little more time, but it's getting dark and I'm worried that we're gonna completely lose the nice natural light. So let's just go for it. The first slice is always messy. Okay, let's see if we can make the second slice a little neater. So here we are. So good. So I hope you guys will consider this pie for your holiday celebrations this year. The recipe is linked below. Thank you so much for watching.